All right. Welcome to another episode of the Legacy Builders podcast. I'm your host, Kyle McGee. Super excited for today. Today, we're interviewing Brian Ward. Brian is the founder and CEO of Quality Roofing Solutions, a leading roofing contractor based in Pensacola, Florida. Established in 2006, the company has grown into a trusted provider of residential and commercial roofing services across the Florida Panhandle. Under Brian's leadership, Quality Roofing Solutions has built a reputation for integrity, reliability, and community commitment. Mr. Brian, welcome.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Brian and I met at a group here in town probably a year ago.
Close to it, yeah.
Close to a year ago. And right away, something I realized about Brian is that he is sharp as a tack. super sharp, thinks outside the box, very innovative. So yeah, I think we're going to have a great conversation today and go a little deeper in business, personal, wherever we take it. So I'd like to start, Brian, if you would, give me some background on your career, kind of how you got started and what you're currently up to today.
All right. Well, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So I started in the roofing business in 2004, actually. I had big plans to go into the medical field and become an anesthesiologist of all things. And I was actually taking a break between my senior year and my first year of college and picked up with a local roofing contractor. And we did a lot of things, roofing, home improvements. But my first day on a roof was 3 weeks to the day prior to the landfall of Hurricane Ivan. So I was introduced rather quickly to the roofing business, and it was head first. So very busy during that first year or so, and there was some damage to campus, so they delayed us going back to school by just a bit. And it was maybe a week or so before I was scheduled to go back to school. The gentleman who employed me at the time called me in the office and said, I really need everybody that I can get right now. If you would consider staying on, you made a generous offer with regard to position and salary and bonuses and such. So at 19, I decided that I could wait. I'd postpone school by a year, and I did, and things went pretty well. But then the following year, when I was getting ready to go back to school, we got another hurricane, had Hurricane Dennis. So here we go again. And by the time all of that shook out, I decided that there was a lot of opportunity in this space and felt like I could pursue it on my own. So I kind of let the dreams associated with the anesthesiology kind of go by the wayside and decided I was going to start my own contracting business, and thought it'd be a great idea to start a roofing company on the heels of 2 hurricanes that was effectively a complete market reset. 95% of all the roofs that were done in the entire market were gone. So I thought it'd be a great idea to start a roofing company. So those first 10 years were tough. There was tough years, and I did a lot of things outside of roofing: windows, doors, siding, decks, fences, gutters, patios, kitchens, baths, just literally anything to put food on the table, and really struggled a lot during those first few years. Of course, that was also in the midst of the 2008 recession. So really struggled. At one point, actually had my truck repossessed, nearly lost my home. And yeah, it was tough, but persevered and made it through that. And as the market began to recover, starting around 2015 or so, it was about 10 years after those storms, when the market started to recover, slowly but surely started shedding more and more of those other services, focusing more and more on roofing. Over the course of what's now been the past 10 years, it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride where just tremendous growth and more people, more vehicles, more markets, more locations, and just a lot of growth, a great trajectory over the past 10 years. It's been a very exciting ride.
That's awesome. So 19 years old, you're just graduating high school. You had dreams to be an anesthesiologist and then kind of fell into the roofing world. I want to go a little deeper there. What interests you about the medical field?
At 18, when I sort of decided that's what I wanted to do, well, I've got family that's in the medical field, but there was also a compensation component that was attractive, but it was also very interesting. I've always been someone that's drawn to things like that. And I felt like that was something that I felt particularly called to or like interested in. So that's the direction I decided I wanted to go.
Yeah. And so it's a direction you wanted to go. And at 18, I mean, no one's got it figured out. You think you have a direction you want to go, but in your case, this opportunity landed kind of in your lap, I guess, per se, and you had some success. Were you on the sales side of things? Where did you start in the roofing world?
No, actually on the roof.
On the roof.
My only experience in sales has been once I started my own organization. I had literally no previous experience in any sort of management, any sort of sales. All of my experience had been on the roof, hands-on, actually doing the work. So that has actually represented over the years some of the, particularly in those first 10 years, some of the larger pain points around management and finances and sales. Like those are the things that I really struggled to learn because I was in fact learning them on my own with very little leadership or guidance. I had to pay the dumb tax for a long time.
I'm a firm believer that belief comes before ability, right? Like you've got to believe in yourself that you could do something before you actually have the skills to technically run a business or do anything. Can you speak on that or think of an example in the early days of your career where you believed you could do something before you actually knew what you were doing? Like I could imagine you being 19, or it sounds like you started it when you were 21. You had been roofing for a couple years. What was your belief like then?
Yeah. So I've always been and have even been accused of being hopelessly optimistic. So I've never really ran into something where I just threw my hands up. I can't figure it out, or I can't do this. You just like get in there, get your hands dirty and figure it out. And I never really let anything hold me back in that respect. Just when there's a new issue, new challenge that you face, just jump over there and start chipping away at it till you figure out what it is that you need to do and improvise and adapt and overcome.
I can picture a 21-year-old Brian on roofs, getting a promotion, getting some success. What was the leap like to go in business for yourself?
So it actually stemmed from an instance where myself and my former employer didn't really see eye about a particular scenario. And there was some things that I didn't understand at that age. See, I think I was 19 or 20, somewhere around that age frame, when there's something that come up that we didn't see eye on, but there was a series of things that had happened that I didn't understand at the time. And it was in direct response to market constriction. So when all of that work, it was very busy and there was lots and lots of work and of course, plenty of revenue and income coming in. Well, when all of that began to dry up, there were fewer jobs, less revenue, and he had already taken on so many overhead expenses associated with a particular expectation for revenue. So as that revenue constricted, it started exerting pressure on everything else. This was from a financial, like business management perspective that I had no understanding of at the time. Well, I started putting some pressure. So first it was like overtime, then it was the bonuses and like all of these things that we had become accustomed to, or I had become accustomed to, they started to go away just because the revenues weren't there to support it any longer. So that was sort of teed it up. And then we didn't see eye on one particular situation or scenario. And I said, you know what? I felt like this was my belief, if you will, that I see what you're doing and I think I can do this and I can do it better. And I think there was a degree of arrogance and lack of understanding about what all really went into it. But I jumped in nevertheless and figured out a lot of difficult and hard lessons along the way, particularly in this first few years. So,
yeah, I think that's a reoccurring theme with a lot of entrepreneurs and high performers and people that are taking risks. It's you get exposure to some people that you're learning from or you're following. And it's like, man, I respect this guy. That much more gifted or talented than me. Like, why not me? Right. And you have a level of confidence in yourself and your work ethic and your mindset and your habits, like that you take the leap. Right. And so that's something that I see come up over and over. So you went into business after these couple hurricanes, the market slowed down a little bit just from a roof aspect. And then also we had this major the Great Recession type deal. And you said you got your truck repossessed. You almost lost your home. All of the best leaders and entrepreneurs I know or have read about or studied have experienced significant failures or setbacks in life. Go deeper on some of these. Tell me about what did you do to push through? Like what kept you motivated and encouraged and to keep going and not quit and go work for somebody?
Believe me, there were a few times where I was like on the cusp, like right on the edge of kind of throwing in the towel. And in fact, I even interviewed a couple of times. I was that close. And it's been so long ago, Kyle, it'd be difficult to articulate precisely what it was. But there's this one moment that I remember very vividly for whatever reason. I got up one morning, I think it was a Saturday morning. Again, we're talking when I was 21 years old. I think I'd maybe been out with some friends the night before and it'd been a late night. But that next morning I was getting up and getting a cup of coffee. And I remember just like going through the bills and stuff on my counter. And there's just this moment, there's this just realization that, okay, I got to get super serious, buckle down. And like, if I'm gonna make this work, like I've got to like 100% commit to it. No more fooling around like this. If I'm going to choose this, I have to choose it. Something about that moment, like it was pivotal because I remember it so vividly. But from that point forward, I really did fully commit. And, when I commit to something like that, it was almost like an obsession where I was putting in 16, 18-hour days nonstop, like every day. It was all I ever did was work in one respect or another. In the mornings, it was kind of prepping for the day and then actually going and doing the work. And then in the afternoons, going and visiting prospects and signing new contracts. And then coming back that evening and writing up estimates and doing material lists and orders and wearing every hat, literally every hat. I was the only person really in the business outside of a couple of guys that I would hire for like day labor. So did that for probably 3 or 4 years before I ever actually made the move to hire a full-time employee.
Looking back on that now is how rewarding looking back at like that part of the journey is it?
Those are some tough days, but there's a lot of character building that happened throughout that time as well. And I think it's been certainly beneficial. It's given me a lot of good perspective and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So as I think that's something that I talk about this with my team and we do book studies and book clubs and we talk about mindset and one thing that we were talking about this morning that I wanted to get your perspective on is we all as humans, I think in general, but definitely as leaders too, we struggle with these self-limiting thoughts or doubts or just getting in our own head. Like starting this podcast, it's like, man, I don't know about that. Like that's pretty uncomfortable. Like putting yourself out there. What is so-and-so going to think about this, blah, blah, blah. And so I think we all have a level of self-doubt and limiting beliefs. Is there anything that you found that works for you to overcome these thoughts?
No, it's a struggle I deal with even to this day. In fact, I think that I struggle with that more in the past, say 5 to 10 years when I'd say probably in the past 5, when it seems like the more success you find, for me anyway, the more success that I find, the more that those things tend to creep in. Years past, self-limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome. Like the entire concept was foreign to me in the past, but I said over the past 5 years or so, that's become a bit more relevant. And there's times when I actually catch myself thinking that way. And by default, it's nothing I've necessarily been hyper intentional about or trained myself to do, but I tend to just give myself my own affirmations in some ways. Like, no, like don't even think that way. You put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this. You've done a lot of things to earn it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. You are a very successful guy. You have a very, I think, as quality roofing. You guys have the largest market share last year in roofing in the area.
By a pretty substantial margin.
By a pretty substantial margin. See your trucks, see your signs everywhere, right? So the largest roofing company in the area, and you're at the helm of it, and you've driven this company and grown it, and you still struggle with it. Like, it's natural. It's a never-ending thing that we have to work towards, right? And affirmations, visualization, keeping solid people around you to check you, right? To recognize wins, like not get caught up in the negative, because the negative typically always takes over the positive, right? You have 10 jobs, you have that one that is just, you can't make ever happy. Like they found one nail in the ground and they just did a roof and they're pissed off. That's where your attention goes, right? Like naturally as humans.
That's right.
So it's interesting you to say that.
And I've always been my own worst critic in every possible respect. This tendency to focus on the negative. I wouldn't necessarily focus on the negative. Like I have a tendency to focus on where we can be better, like where we can improve, and like a bit of an obsession with that. which can sometimes create challenges for the people that are around me and our team, where it's not necessarily that I'm looking for this negative thing, but I have a tendency of pointing those out. Here's where we can improve this, and we improve that, and we can get better here and better there. I think sometimes it can be received as being focused on negative, but it's certainly not the way it's processed. I'm looking to optimize and
But
improve.
earlier you said that you could be described as hopelessly optimistic. So you've got this optimism to keep things going that, hey, we're going to work it out. But you have a level of excellence that you want things done to a certain standard. So you're looking at small details. Is that something that you were born with, or is that something you think developed over time throughout as you grew?
No, I think it's something that's inherent for me. It's not a trait or an attribute that I've intentionally tried to develop, but I'm not sure where that is derived from, but likely from my father, my grandfather. Certainly remember hearing this phrase from both of them in my youth: anything is worth doing right the first time. And I can't tell you how many times, whether it be a chore of some sort or working with either of them, farming or in the garden, how many times I had to do something twice because I didn't get it right the first time. So I think through that sort of training, I have a tendency of seeking perfection.
Sure.
And in fact, struggle with that to some degree, where you're done. I have to remind myself often, and my team too, that done is better than perfect, because perfect rarely gets done.
Speaking of your dad and grandfather, what did they do for a living?
So my dad, he still farms to some degree, but he's also had a career with the Santa Rosa County Road and Bridge Department, and he's nearing retirement with that. But all his life, he's had and created multiple income streams through rental properties and farming, hay, peanuts, cotton, and then of course the county. And some of those entrepreneur qualities I certainly learned from him.
That's interesting. Today you have the top producing roofing company in the area. You dabble in real estate, you buy land, and you have rental properties, and you're interested in some development stuff. Talk to me through your habits and your routine and how you structure your time. Because as entrepreneurs, we can get strung out and we can get a million different things going, and it's easy to say yes to everything, right? But typically what I'm seeing, and I'm sure you're no different, is you're pretty intentional with your time. So talk to me through your rituals and routines.
Kyle, like I said earlier, I'm my own worst critic, and this is no different. While the way that I manage my time is likely better than a lot of folks, I'm still very critical of myself in this respect, and I think I could always do better. But I certainly try to be very intentional with it, and I've gotten much better at that over the past few years, primarily just simply through the use of a calendar. Just using a calendar as it was intended to be used and blocking out time and scheduling intentional focus time for different things. I can't recall which book it was that I read. It was been a couple of years ago, but there's one nugget in that book that I remember very specifically. And it was talking about some of the characteristics of particularly successful CEOs. And the one thing that I latched onto was that they have an innate ability to focus. There's always something that is trying to demand or gain my attention, and it just constant distractions coming in from every direction. And it makes it very difficult to get dialed in on one particular thing and get that thing to a finish line. And by being really intentional with your time and focusing on these things, you actually get things done that move the needle. And if you can eliminate these other distractions that don't actually move your initiatives forward and get the things done that do, you can actually make a lot of headway instead of just sort of spinning your wheels in the minutia and the distractions that constantly bombard you.
If you don't mind sharing, in today's season of life, what are some of those things that you've time blocked and that you're currently getting laser focused on?
Yeah. So one of the things, without getting too deep in the weeds, one of the things that we identified in particular within the roofing organization was a data set that's available that, and I think Kyle, I've probably shared some more details with you about this, but access to this data set is challenging, and I've attempted to hand it off to some others without a whole lot of luck. But if we can ever collect all of this information, then organize it within a database, which we had an external software company actually develop for us, it gives us an advantage over our competition that would be akin to having a crystal ball in many ways. And I realized the importance of having this and the lack of progress that we're making. So recently I've been very intentional about blocking off time to actually collect and aggregate and parse this data, get it into our software so that we can use it in the way that was intended. So it's, again, being intentional, blocking off time to focus on things like that I know for certain are going to have a tangible effect, tangible impact on the business moving forward. Those are the sort of things that I want to spend my time, intentional time on, the things that I know are important and need to happen.
Yeah. And that takes a lot of working on the business to identify the things that are the needle movers.
Right.
I have a little note next to my computer that's just a reminder, and it says, what am I doing today to move the needle? And really, if you boil it down, in my business, there's probably 4 or 5 things that I need to be doing, right? And in anybody's line of work and anybody's business, there's really, as the CEO, and especially when you've scaled and you have a team and you're delegating and certain things, there's really only a couple things that if you actually focus on can move the needle. And we don't got to go into the details, but working on the data to identify who's the potential to need a roof, right? And honing in on that, people aren't doing that. You're running a sophisticated operation. It's very data driven. It's intentional. It's not, hopefully we've got a good reputation and people call us, right? No, you're advertising, you're targeting, you're doing the things. Are there any industry specific groups that's helped you learn about this? Or is this just learned through the years of trial and error?
Well, maybe a bit of both. About this topic or subject in particular, maybe not so much, but there's certainly one specific industry group. A friend of mine named Hunter Ballou, he also owns a successful roofing company up in South Carolina, but he started not only a roofing convention called RoofCon that's annually in Central Florida in Orlando, but he also started a group called Revolt that's basically just a collection of like-minded business owners throughout the country that participate in this group and do retreats. And there's a chat group and tons of training and resources and things. I found a lot of value, particularly my first year or two in that group and being amongst those guys. I found a fair amount of value there. As I've grown and sort of extracted the value that I could from it, it's become less valuable over time, but there was a ton of impact that came, particularly inside of that first year, that I think was a really good.
Was that
for me personally as much or more than it did for the business?
Sure. Was that a roofing specific group?
Right. Yeah. Roofing specific.
So again, another super common theme, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in, doesn't matter what you're doing. There are people across the country that are very successful that will open up the playbook. Yeah, you might have to pay a little bit, but think about the return on investment that you've made from whatever the quote unquote cost was. The return has been crazy by as much knowledge that you've gained from that,
Certainly.
Right? And people, it's not worth trying to reinvent the wheel, right? Basically everything that we've done, unless you're Elon Musk and trying to get to Mars, 99% of the businesses that are out there and are super successful, people have already done.
That's right.
Right? And are still doing it. And they will open the playbook up for you.
There's so much value in that. And as you grow, it becomes harder and harder to access people who have gotten as far as you have or further. There's just fewer and fewer people available for that. So it becomes more and more challenging. But here recently, I've connected with a handful of similar sized businesses throughout the country. And we're actually in talks about kind of creating our own group that we can sort of gain that sort of benefit. But we're looking at businesses that are north of 20 million up to say 100 million. These are companies that we're dealing with a lot of similar sort of problems, and just the issues and challenges we face are more relatable because you're closer to the issue. Whereas having companies that are separate, let's say a $2 to $5 million organization versus a $30 to $40 million organization, generally there's so much real estate between those two things. It's difficult for either one of them to really add a whole lot of value to the other because the challenges and the issues that they're facing are so uniquely different. They're just incomprehensibly different, really.
Yeah, and the an advantage we have, like with a geographic advantage, is like we're a relatively smaller fish in a bigger pond, but we're in a growing area, and majority of people aren't doing these kind of things, right? So like you could talk to these guys in these bigger markets and bring some of their same ideas and dominate,
That's right.
right? Literally dominate. And then a byproduct of some of this, that like not only are you gaining industry level detailed knowledge about things, the people are typically higher level people, right? And they are inspiring to be around because they hold themselves different. Their habits are different, their family life. Some of the people I've met from going to conferences and joining groups like this, it's like they're inspiring because like they have their faith. They're driven by their faith and their family. And there is a balance. Like you talk to so many people and it's like, oh, there's no such thing as a work-life balance. Well, it's like, yes, as an entrepreneur, there's a level of sacrifice, like in order to be successful, but there's also a lot of people that are living a great life and running their business. And so surrounding yourself with those kind of people elevates your game.
That's right.
Right. Have you seen that in your life?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any specific examples that like you've noticed from just your environment, like in your personal life, get better?
Yeah, so it reminds me of, this is something that both my father and grandfather both used to say, and I may not be able to articulate it verbatim, but birds of a feather flock together sort of concept. Yeah. I think there was something about turkeys and vultures or eagles or something.
You could tell Brian was raised up in North Milton.
That's right. But they'll saying that you tend to become the average of the 5 people that you hang around the most. That rings so true. I remember some of the friends that I chose in my youth. My father would make mention of that to me, and I didn't see it for what it was at the time, but it's absolutely true. And I can see the effects of that in adulthood. The people that I tend to spend the majority of my time with, you ultimately see reflection of them and who they are in your personal life, because you tend to become a bit more like the people that you're spending your time with.
For better or worse.
That's right. For better or worse. Yeah, I can absolutely see that.
So anyone listening, definitely give more thought to your environment. I think that there's a tremendous return on investing in a specific group or people that are further along than you are, right? Like find that group of people that you want to be around and then see what they're doing. And it's typically not rocket science. It's just,
and look, there's absolutely value in the industry specific type group, but there's just as much value in non-industry specific type groups. I've been part of a group here locally for the past 5 or 6 years that there's actually no 2 members that are from the same industry or background. And some of the most innovative things that we've done inside my organization over the years, they may not have necessarily came directly from that group, but they have come from peers that are outside of my industry. It's concepts and ideas that came from outside the industry. There are other service-based types of industries. Like, well, why wouldn't that translate? Why can't we do that in our space? And like I said, some of the most innovative things that we've done had been born from suggestions or ideas that spawn outside of our industry altogether.
Yeah, we'll give the group he's talking about, Vistage, a plug here. Any business leader or owner that is interested, I highly recommend you look into Vistage. It's actually where Brian and I met before I got kicked out. But a great group of people. And to echo Brian's point, like when you're hearing and you're in a room for a full day, like you meet once a month for an entire day, like 8 to 4 or something, and you're hearing people's problems, challenges, opportunities, like it stimulates your mind to think differently, right? Because we're so accustomed to working in the business, you don't necessarily sometimes take that 10,000 foot view to work on your business. And it's extremely powerful. Also, because you realize that everyone's really dealing with the same problems. Right. And it typically ends up around people. And so any thoughts there?
Yeah. So there's something you said there, and it reminded me of a phrase that I use often, that sometimes it's incredibly difficult to read the label when you're actually inside the jar. So sometimes the solution that you're looking for is literally just on the other side of the glass. Just it's impossible to see it when you're standing inside of the problem. And I think those non-industry specific type groups challenge you to think differently and look at problems from different angles. And you may have peers in those groups that see it from an entirely different prerogative or different perspective that can help shed light, ask questions that help you see things from a different vantage point. So there's undoubtedly a ton of value in groups like that. And I'd strongly encourage anybody that is considering a peer group or mastermind that certainly find one that's a good fit.
It's a significant investment. Like the return is like priceless. Like sometimes, what is one idea worth that generates $1 million? I don't really know. I'm a huge quote guy, so I haven't heard this one before, and I'm going to add it to my list. Sometimes it's hard to read the label inside the jar.
That's right.
I need to know who credited that. Is that a Brian Ward quote?
No, it's not mine.
So a couple more questions. The show's called Legacy Builders. And I think part of that stems from me losing my dad at an early age and then having kids soon after that. And like giving that a bunch of thought of like, man, what is it that we're actually doing? And what are people that are driven and doing a lot? Like, what are they driven by? So I'm interested to hear, what does legacy mean to you, the word, and then what do you want your legacy to be when you left Earth?
Sure. So I think the way that I perceive the word legacy, it undoubtedly is evolved over time. The way that you look at this, the concept of legacy in your 20s versus 30s versus me approaching 40 this year, like it absolutely evolves, and I think about it differently. But when I hear the word, my first thought, honestly, is about my grandpa, my grandmother and my grandfather. We lost both of them in a house fire in, oh goodness, it's been better than 10 years or close to 10 years now. And I'll never forget. And just like when I hear the word legacy, like this is instantly what I think of. It was their viewing. And I'll never forget this, like these images burned in my mind. And I knew they were like well known in the community. I had no idea how far reaching their impacts throughout their life. I had no idea how far reaching those impacts were. But I remember seeing a line of people that was, I'd say, probably close to a quarter mile long, going out of the church, probably 4, 5, 6 people wide, going all the way down the side of the highway. It just unbelievable. And as everybody was passing through, it was hours and hours for everybody to cycle through. And it's just such a huge turnout and so many things that I learned when just talking to people and meeting people and hearing about the impacts that he had on them personally and learning about all these things that he did, that my grandma and grandpa, things that they did in their life that I never knew about them. I never heard about them, and they're just really impactful. And so when I think of legacy, like that's instantly kind of what comes to mind. And it's not that I necessarily want thousands of people to come to my funeral, but it was the things that they had to say. It was the way that they were remembered. The concept of legacy, like that's what it means to me. Is like, how are you ultimately remembered? Legacy is how people remember you, is the lives that you touch and how you made them feel. And I think my grandfather left a really powerful legacy, certainly with me, but for thousands of people that he met throughout his life. And I can only hope that I would have a comparable or similar legacy when I pass.
Yeah, it's powerful, extremely powerful. And you've definitely made an impact on me in our short amount of time, just bouncing ideas off of you, the way you think. Like, I value your opinion, thoughts, and definitely look forward to getting to know you more, but that is powerful. Couple more questions. What are you currently working on that you're most excited about?
Oh, I've always got a couple of interesting irons in the fire. Most excited about would probably be so we'll call it a fertilizer / biostimulant company last year. And I'm pretty excited about the direction that some of these things, there's actually 5 different sub-products within it. The primary company name is called StimuPro, but it makes biostimulants for turf, for food plots, for agriculture. There's an adjuvant for Kogan grass, which is a particularly invasive weed species. So I've been talking to some of the right people in this sort of space, and I can't name drop yet, but pretty excited about where that might be headed, and then working hard on some of those things. And might be something that blows up here in the next year or two. So
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And that's another reason why I love talking to you, because you always got some things going on. Before we hit recording, Brian was telling me about an RV park opportunity in Foley. We've got STEMU Pro, we've got quality roofing, we've got developments all over the place. I don't want to go too deep here, but I've got to ask, like, how do you allow something like that not take your eye off the ball of the bread and butter? Like, quality roofing is the bread and butter, right? Like, that's the main thing that you have going, the income generator, a business that you're scaling. And now you have something that, to me, doesn't seem like it really relates to that. Like, as far as industry, do you hire someone to run it, and then you're just kind of the big level thinker and the relationship guy? Or how much of your time do you spend towards this new venture?
Not terribly much. And I try to do more and more of that, primarily within the roofing organization. So I'm still very much involved, but at a high level, not so much involved with day-to-day operating of the business. I've been blessed with an amazing team. And honestly, I have no idea. When people ask me how we ended up with so many great people, the answer generally is, I'm not real sure. I think I defer to luck in some ways, but I think really there's a culture there that we've created that I think, for better or worse, is a reflection of me and who I am. And I try to make sure that we're creating a culture that is an extension of my own personal values. And people seem to be attracted to that. And we've managed to onboard a lot of really great people that handle the majority of that day to day. So I'm not consumed entirely by it. And I have the freedom to pursue some of these other opportunities. But even with these other opportunities, in most cases, whether it be commercial rentals or where I'll hire a property management firm, or if it's the STEMU Pro, where I've got my uncle and my cousin who are spearheading the majority of that, whereas I'm focused on some of the more technical components of like website and digital and relationships and connections with the right people. And I just got leveraging network. I think that's something that's evolved over the past 5 years or so, where, in fact, great book recommendation, How to Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. I think I gave you a copy. That was one of those books that really just helped shift my perspective on things quite a bit. So I tried.
I think I gave you the copy. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But
I had to buy, oh goodness, I think I had to buy 500 copies to get an invite. I actually spent the weekend with Dan. I think maybe there's 15 or 16 of us that all ultimately contributed to purchasing some copies of that book to spend the weekend with Dan in his place in Canada. We're going to talk about being in the right room.
So I was laughing because literally the last guy I interviewed, we were talking about this book, Buy Back Your Time. Yeah. Go deeper. Like, tell us about, so you spent a weekend with them?
Yeah. So there was, let's say that there's 15 or 16 of us that all kind of did the same thing and went up to Kelowna, British Columbia for a weekend and spent the weekend there kind of doing a workshop with Dan and getting to know one another. And I think there was over $1 billion in annual revenue in that room with, I think it was 15 or 16 business owners. Just like a really impressive lineup of CEOs that were in there. I was by a long shot the small fish, right? But those are the sort of rooms that you need to find yourself in. And sometimes it's a significant investment to find yourself there. But the nuggets that you can pull away from that and just the relationships that you can create in those rooms, the long-term benefit to making those connections is that you can't place a tangible value on it.
There's no way to put a dollar to it.
Right.
Tell someone that's listening that, I mean, hopefully they're convinced by now, like, go buy the book, right?
Yes.
Like, we don't get $1 from it. It's just like, this is a killer book.
Come see me. I still have about 250 copies left. Like, I'll be glad to disperse them.
Yeah. Well, I could use some more because I lost my copy by giving it away. Tell us, like, what is the overarching concept of Buy Back Your Time?
Yeah. So at a very high level, effectively, you use an equation to calculate what your time is worth. And if you can hire someone to fulfill a role, like, for example, if you're spending your time doing something that you can hire somebody for less than what your time is worth per the calculation, then what are you doing? Spending your time on that. If you can hire somebody to do it, they can do it, let's say, to as 80% as well as you can. Because there's always that component of it where you feel like somebody else can't do it as well as you can. Well, truth of the matter is, if you hire somebody to do it, now they may not be able to do it as well as you can right off of the bat, but because that's their primary focus, by the time you give them an opportunity to sort of develop inside of that role, there's a pretty high likelihood they'll be able to do it better than you ever could, because that's their primary focus. So just learning to let go. And that's something that I think a lot of budding entrepreneurs struggle with, is letting go of the reins on some of these things. That I certainly had a challenge with it early on, but it's something that it's a muscle. And if you work it, you get stronger and easier. And now I look for every opportunity to delegate and hand things off, because I've recognized that in many cases, these others can often do it as good or better than I can if I just trust them and put a little time into development.
100%. And I am notorious for like reading something like this that resonates with me and going all in. I think we went from like 6 employees to like 18 in like 6 months. And I was like, oh shit, like I got to think about this on a deeper level, because there is still cash flow and payroll and everything else. But really, anyone that's trying to grow something, it takes people. Right. And there's a full nother podcast, or we could make this a 3-hour one, but to just talk about the level of leadership and skills that's required to lead a team and grow a team. But buy back your time. Great book recommendation. Last question. If you could give, and I mean, you've already given a ton of advice, but if you could give just one piece of advice to the next generation of leaders and businessmen, what would it be?
I know how you love quotes. I've got one for you. I probably use this one second most. Necessity is the mother of innovation. And I love that one because I've struggled sometimes with being a bit too analytical, like wanting all the data before I make a decision. What happens is you end up taking no action when you do that. So that's something I've consciously tried to develop internally for myself, is having a bias towards the action. And when you do that, you don't have all the answers, you don't have all the information, but by taking action, like, you're going to reveal the problems, and ultimately you reveal and solve the problems faster than your competitors, because they're still trying to get all the information they need before they actually move forward and take action. Well, when you do that, often you create necessity, because now you're in it. You've got to solve the problem fast, but nothing results in solutions faster than necessity, where like there's pressure and you got to figure this thing out. Like, people all of a sudden become very innovative when your back's against the wall and you have to figure it out. So that's one that I really like. Necessity is the mother of innovation.
Yeah, I love that. And once you have that pressure, you're going to perform, right? Or you're going to go home and you're going to fail, right? So by putting yourself in positions where you have to perform, it forces it. Well, man, this has been a great conversation. I love getting inside of your head. I think that you're a very sharp guy. I don't think you give yourself enough credit, honestly, for how sharp you are, and super excited to watch your growth and be a part of it any way I can be, and to deepen our relationship. And so got a lot of respect for you. And yeah, so if anybody listening wants to get a hold of you, how can they reach out to you?
Sure. Brian at qualityroofingsolutions.com. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, either or.
Yep. And we'll have a link to all of those in the show notes. So thank you all for listening to another episode of the Legacy Builders Podcast. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kyle.